Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. And it looks like John Swinney may well be breaking yet another manifesto promise, this time over human rights. Swinney promised that human rights would be centre and, really at the forefront going forward of the SNP's policies. He wanted to ensure that people were treated fairly, that there was no discrimination based on this, that, the other, and any other thing you can kind of think of. He wanted to push identity politics like the SNP have done for some time and to engender the whole thing, no pun intended, in law. And so people are saying, well, that's all very fine and pleasant, but why haven't you done it yet? And so they are urging him to honour this manifesto pledge. And he hasn't done it yet. And it looks like things have changed. He's realised that it may not necessarily be such a good idea after all. In fact, it may be a whole can of worms that he is opening up here by creating this and putting this into law, because the SNP would lose control if it was enshrined. And they like to have control. And so enshrining things in law like this may mean that they become guilty of breaching their own laws. And it's a wonderful thing to behold. And so they're squirming. They are absolutely squirming like, a fish on a hook, desperate to get away from what they've created for themselves. But they've walked themselves into this trap, I think. But the charities are on it. His own people within his own party are on it, and they're saying, why isn't this happening? Why aren't we moving forward? Why haven't we got the committees dealing with these things? And of course, he hasn't got an answer. All these third sector groups are saying, you promised, John Swinney. You said that this would happen. The SNP said that this would happen, and nothing has been done. And it was all part of their programme for government, which, they said, we're going to attempt to do this, that and the other. But this, I suppose you could call it long-awaited Human Rights Act from the SNP government, would enshrine international law, particularly United Nations treaties. It was supposed to put strong protections in for everyday rights and things like that. But they've realised that actually to go along with some of these things would remove power from them. And that, of course, would diminish the SNP, and it would diminish their importance. It would make them less important. And they don't want that. Their whole basis is that they are important. Now, campaigners are saying it could make for fundamental changes to the relationship between government, people, organisations across the whole country, and with international relations between Scotland and other countries, particularly the home countries. And it could create many problems within the United Kingdom, where different human rights laws would apply depending on whether you're north of the border or not. Now, some legislation has been introduced, but then not continued. The remainder of the legislation, the vast amount of the legislation, is yet to be introduced because they're trying to time it out, slow it down, and hopefully have people forget about it. Because let's pretend it's happening. Oh, there's been unfortunate delays in the vague hope that people won't remember what they promised, and hopefully the problem will go away of its own accord, which of course it never does. Now, Amnesty International wrote an open letter complaining about it. The same Amnesty International, of course, that woman down in Dartford who was clapping and yelling and supporting the cutting of the throats of political opponents. Weird that Amnesty International would think like that, but they want this brought in. And so what's he doing? Well, he's saying and made the statement that they are fully committed with ongoing this, and pushing for this legislation, being fully committed. They're making announcements because, of course, announcements are easy. Announcements are cheap. Announcements are meaningless. Legislation, on the other hand, now that's hard, because it means people have to sit and talk and see the problems. highlight the problems. That's the difficult bit for the SNP. They don't want this. Now, there's a lot of things that they definitely do want to put in. There's a lot of things they definitely don't want to put in. But the campaigners are saying, no, the things that they don't want to put in are very, very important. They want to ensure that people can claim their human rights, but they want to limit what those human rights are. It's all an exercise in showmanship. Look what we have done. Look at this marvellous thing that we have done. But when you lift the hood and look at the engine, it's a bucket of bolts, isn't it? It's a pile of crap. It's like, you know, would you, honest John's car market, would you buy a used car off John Swinney? No, simply I wouldn't. But it's just never going to happen, basically. So they're going to try and time it out. They've got 18 months left of this useless SNP government. And they're going to try and push it out to the end so they don't actually have to legislate, knowing that they're not going to be in government afterwards, and then the whole thing can be abandoned at best, or at worst, it becomes somebody else's problem. Like so many policies of the SNP, they're incapable, I think, of dealing and fixing any of them, and so they time them out so that they do eventually become somebody else's problem. But they're not going to keep their word. They can't. They can't keep their word. And so they're sidestepping the problem. But everybody's noticing. They're hoping it goes away, but everyone's highlighting this. And they're making these calls. Like I say, with Amnesty writing that letter. But it isn't just them. There's other groups as well. There's charities involved. But a Scottish Government spokesman said that the Scottish Government remains committed to enhancing, right, not pushing through what was agreed, but enhancing the human rights protections for all. And this includes through a human rights bill, but the priorities for the year ahead will be announced in the First Minister's programme for government in September. Now, by the time September comes, you'll have 16 months left of the government. They're not going to be able to push this through all the committee stages, get it all through, do the 2 readings, enshrine it in law, and get it accepted, but also get it accepted by Westminster, who will have an overriding veto on this, Section 35 and all. Because if it alters the relationship between human rights in Scotland and England, they will just veto it. So this is why they can't go for the full one. And they know it. And they're fucked. And it is great to see. It's yet another time when the SNP are so filled with panic because the promises they make are completely undeliverable. And they daren't deliver them even if they were deliverable, because it would reduce them. It's a party from hell, isn't it? Anyway, just thought that was interesting. Thanks very much. Take care. Bye.